Welcome back to another episode of Talking Sports with Brandon. It's the greatest time of the year, in my opinion, and that time would be the first game of the NFL season is tonight, as the time I'm recording this, September 8th, 2022. Like I said, it's the greatest time of the year. Football is finally back. It's been ever since February, so 7 months since the last real NFL football game was played, and we finally get back to real NFL football. 17 straight weeks, or 18 straight weeks, but obviously 17 games of just football, and then the playoffs obviously come, and then we'll see who will advance to the Super Bowl and obviously win the Super Bowl, and then we'll start the process all over again next year. But we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves right now. Obviously, the season hasn't even started yet, so we want to enjoy the moment while we're still in it. And it's going to be a really exciting football season this year, in my opinion. I think there's a lot that can happen on both sides, both conferences in the NFL, AFC and NFC. Now, obviously, the AFC is a little bit more competitive than the NFC, and we'll highlight some stuff that happened in the offseason for the AFC teams. Some stuff happened in the NFC, but obviously more the focus was on those AFC teams and the powerhouses that are now coming out of the AFC. And it's going to be interesting to see what exactly happens. We've known, the mainstays in the AFC the last couple of years have been the Chiefs. And as you go into this season, in their own division, they might not even be the best team in that division. So a lot of changes happened. A lot of things are going to go on throughout this season that will be surprising, I would say. I think a lot of us probably have our picks already. Later in this episode, I'm going to go through my Super Bowl picks, and I think my picks are probably pretty standard to what other people are probably saying. I haven't seen too many other, experts or other, football guys in the media world. I haven't seen their Super Bowl picks yet, but I would say mine are pretty standard to what a lot of people probably have. Maybe a little different. Again, we'll see in this video. And let me know what yours are as well. You can put it down in the comments if you want to. But that will come later in this episode. I do want to start, like I said, highlighting some moves that happened in the offseason. And let's start with the AFC West. Like I said, obviously the Chiefs, they've been to all these AFC championship games, at least making it there the last, 4 or 5 years. Obviously going to 2 Super Bowls, winning one, losing another. Obviously they lost to the Bengals last year in the AFC championship game. The Bengals went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Rams. Obviously the Rams are coming into this season as the reigning Super Bowl champs. Have a pretty good shot at going back, no doubt about it. But in terms of the Chiefs, though, they lost Tyreek Hill. In fact, traded him to the Dolphins. So, he wanted a new contract extension. They couldn't work it out. They had to trade him. So you lose not even probably, I would say the most dynamic weapon in the NFL in Tyreek Hill. Really didn't seem like he was ever going to slow down. Obviously, his big thing is speed. Speed usually goes away as you get older. You maybe get injured, more dinged up. Obviously, playing receiver in the NFL, you're going to get some hits taken. Doesn't really seem like he's lost any speed at all. So you're losing, again, the most dynamic weapon in the NFL at wide receiver. And with a guy like Mahomes, with a guy like Andy Reid at calling plays, the offense is going to be, with Hill in there, is so unpredictable as it's been the last handful of years. And pairing him with Travis Kelce at tight end, who's, you can't even say he's a tight end because he's basically a wide receiver. He just happens to play tight end. That's one of the most lethal 1-2 combos we've seen in a long time, to be honest. For sure, in terms of wide receiver tight end combo, for sure. But just in terms of receiving combos and duos and weapons that a team could have, it has to be one of the most lethal over the last 20 plus years, maybe even longer than that, you could probably say. If you were to go back and look at all the great teams, all the great receiving threats that teams have had in the past, that's got to be up there as one of the best. Now, does Mahomes help? Does Andy Reid help? For sure. But, Kelce was putting up big numbers with Alex Smith before Mahomes got there. Hill had a big year with Alex Smith as his quarterback. Obviously, those numbers get inflated when Mahomes is your quarterback because he is, a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. But it's no doubt about it going to be a loss for them. They try to, get some pieces back to try and replace Tyreek Hill. Again, you can't replace Tyreek Hill. It's not possible. But can you get some guys that can at least fill some gaps for you, at least make up some of that production? Sure, you can. And some of those guys, you got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's obviously, he's a lot of controversy over him in Pittsburgh, obviously with the off-the-field stuff, and the play was really good when he was behind Antonio Brown, but then when he became the true number one on that team, the production seemed to dip. Now, was that just only him, or was that a product of that offense as well? With Ben Roethlisberger, not much of a running game until last year when you had Najee Harris, but we'll see what he does in Kansas City. I think a lot of people are expecting him to have, maybe not the year that he had. I believe it was 2019, I think it was, or 2018, whichever year it was, where he was toe to toe with Antonio Brown in terms of numbers. Will he have a year like that? I would say probably not. But will he have a bounce back year? I don't doubt that at all. They also got MVS from Green Bay. Again, that's just another option, a good down the field threat guy who can give you some speed. The long ball is obviously a big part of their offense as well. So you got some guys that can at least fill some gaps on that team that you obviously got away from in Tyreek Hill. But we'll see. Again, a lot of people are not picking them to win the AFC West. A lot of people are not picking them. Some people aren't even picking them to make the playoffs. So I don't know if I'd go that far. I haven't gone through my full playoff bracket and picked every single team who's going to win each division, who's going to make the wild card. I haven't done that so far. Maybe I will at some point. Maybe after the first couple weeks, maybe I'll make a true playoff bracket and I'll stick to that one. But I don't know. Right now, I don't think I can go that far. The defense is still good enough. It's not great. It's definitely not. They lost Tyrann Mathieu as well. It's definitely not as good as it was the last couple of years, even though that wasn't that great of a defense, to be fair. But I still can't go that far to say they wouldn't make the playoffs, because you still have Mahomes, you still have Reed, and they have the experience, they have the character of a championship type team. So I can't go that far. But like I said, in terms of the other teams in the AFC West, the other teams have gotten better. And that's what you need to do when a team has dominated the division. And again, it started before Mahomes. Even Alex Smith, they weren't making Super Bowls or having true Super Bowl aspirations, but they were easily winning that division every single year. They were not getting pressured from these other teams. Really, ever since Peyton Manning left, it's been the Chiefs winning that division every single year. So the other teams had to do something. Obviously, the Chargers are probably the favorite in that division. I think some people, you can kind of go either way with, Vegas, Denver, or LA. I think most people would probably lean towards LA as being the best team in that division, the team that can really take the reins over as being the top dog in that division. I would probably lean that way as well. I think that with Herbert, I've always been a Herbert fan. If you've listened to this show the last 2 years, you know that I was always big on Herbert when it came from him in the draft to Tua. Who should you go as the quarterback there? I was always on Herbert. I always thought he's the classic quarterback, pocket quarterback, big guy, huge arm, has the intelligence to be a great quarterback, to read defenses. And as you've seen the last year now in that offense, is that he can actually run the ball a little bit. Now, are you going to do design runs? Are you going to do read options with him? No, you're not, because again, he's too valuable as a pocket passer to try and do that with and potentially injure him. And he's not as athletic as guys like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but in terms of scrambling out of the pocket, making plays happen that wouldn't have happened, if you get pressure on your right side, you have to escape to your left. He can scramble and get yards. He's actually pretty athletic. I think, they didn't want to do that with him at Oregon because he was just too valuable to that team to have him try and run a lot. So even in a spread offense like they do at Oregon, they tried not to run him as much as they could. But I think for the Chargers, I think they want to have him run a little bit more. Again, maybe not design runs, but if there's a pocket, if there's a pathway to scramble, I think they want him to take that. Again, his arm's always going to be better than his legs, but I do value his legs a lot more than I did coming out of college, and I think that's a valuable asset because all quarterbacks nowadays need to be able to scramble a little bit. You don't have to be Lamar Jackson and run for 1,000 yards every single year, or Kyler Murray, but you at least got to keep a defense honest with your legs, because if you're going to sit in the pocket all day and as soon as pressure comes, you're falling down or you're throwing it away, defenses can just bull rush you. They can just send guys at you. They know you're not going to be able to escape the pocket. They don't need to worry about the flats and having a quarterback run through them for 8 yards, on a broken play. So I think that's valuable. Other additions that the Chargers made, they got Khalil Mack, which is he the same Khalil Mack as he was with Oakland? No, he's obviously not. He's not even the same that he was with Chicago that first year they got him, 2018, when they had that great defense. He's not that same guy. Injuries have plagued him. Old age just kind of got into him a little bit. So he's not going to be that that super menace on the other side of Joey Bosa, but he's still going to be a valuable piece. I think they definitely upgraded their defense with him. They also got J.C. Jackson from the New England Patriots, who obviously has been the interception leader the last couple years in terms of overall picks over the last 2-3 years. So that's a good guy to get. How is he going to be as a true number one in that division? I'm not sure. He can definitely cover the really good wide receivers, but can he truly lock down someone? There's another guy who I'm going to get to on one of these other teams that came over to the AFC West this year. Can he lock down that guy? I doubt it. No one can. But he's going to play him twice a year, maybe even 3 times a year if they both make the playoffs. So that he's going to have a big spot. I think he signed a 4-year contract with them. But they're really looking for that in year one. So I think they're looking to make an AFC Championship game this year, the Chargers they are. And if they don't, I think, we're going to see something potentially, from a head coaching standpoint. Again, this is all speculation, obviously, but the way that last year ended with, they really probably should have made the playoffs. All they needed was a tie and they would have made the playoffs. And, they decided to just do weird clock management and going for it and stuff. And they lost that game, obviously, to the Raiders. The Raiders made the playoffs. Even though it was Staley's first year, and I am a fan of Staley as a coach, but he definitely made some weird decisions all throughout last year. And it was obviously the biggest stage, Sunday Night Football, the last game of the season, last season in in game 17. Just really weird stuff. So, if they don't, if they can't even win a playoff game this year, or maybe they do, but it's an ugly playoff game, it's not, they barely win, they kind of get lucky, they escape, they were making mistakes, and then they get blown out the next week or something. I would not be surprised if a change possibly happened. If there was an experienced coach, if Sean Payton's going to be available to teams next year, I would not be surprised if something not great happened this year. They go to Sean Payton. I mean, he's obviously a quarterback kind of whisperer guy. He's a great offensive mind. I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. But again, that's way down the line. We don't know what's going to happen this year. But like I said, that's a team that people are expecting to take that next step, and so am I, to be honest. Because when you have a quarterback like Herbert, who is, if you don't want to say top 3 right now, that's fine, but he's top 5 for sure. You have Allen, you have Mahomes, you have Herbert. You have, people are putting Burrow in there as well. I guess you kind of have to let a team to a Super Bowl. It makes sense. And I would say probably Rodgers as well. Back-to-back MVP. It's kind of hard not to still put him in there. But, the expectation and the goals go way up when you have a guy like that. It just does. Even if it's unfair, fair, whatever it is, the expectations are going to go up, and they're going to be expected to win that division over Kansas City, over Vegas, and over Denver. And now moving on to Vegas, like I said, the guy that they got, Davante Adams, that's the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. Again, I said Tyreek Hill was the most dynamic weapon in the NFL, and he is. But Davante Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL. He has been for the last couple years, and he's going to continue to be the best wide receiver in the NFL. And that was just a great get for them because they needed that. With him, Renfrow, and Waller, that's a pretty good 1-2-3. Now, you can say what you want about Renfrow, but he's a solid wide receiver. He's a great route runner. He's going to be open all the time, especially now with Davante Adams as your number 1. You're going to be seeing a little less coverage going your way. And with his route running, his ability to get open, I think he's going to have a really good year this year. Waller, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be good. He should be able to stay healthy, but assuming he does, he's obviously a huge weapon down the middle for them. And the expectation for them is Carr. I mean, what can he do to elevate himself to potentially be that true top 10 quarterback, maybe even top 8 quarterback? A lot of people are really high on Derek Carr. I wouldn't say I'm that high on him. I like him as a quarterback for sure, but is he really an elite quarterback? He had the 2016 season where he broke his leg at the end of the season, and he was going. It looked like he potentially could have been the MVP if he didn't get injured. that was his best year in the NFL, and that was what 6 years ago, 5 6 years ago. I just don't know. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's solid. I think there's times where he makes mistakes though. I think he tries to go deep, tries to make the big play all the time. I think having Adams there, again, college teammates, at Fresno, when they were in college, however many years ago that was. So I think that helps. They have a good connection. It's not like it's some random guy who's coming in. They already have a connection from before. They're good friends anyways. So I think maybe having that true number one wide receiver, which, he's never really had. He's never had a wide receiver like Devontae Adams. Even just a lesser version of a number one. He's never had that in his career. So I think that could help for sure. I think the offensive line definitely has some holes in it, though. It's not the best offensive line. So we'll see how that goes. Again, if you're going to be going against the Chargers, that's Bosa and Khalil Mack. If it's the Chiefs, it's Frank Clark and Chris Jones. I mean, those four guys right there are not guys I'd want to see coming at me all game long. That's a scary thought, to be honest. And even Denver, Denver with their defensive line, they got Randy Gregory, they have Bradley Chubb. I mean, just think of the duos on each of those defensive lines that you're going to have to face twice a year. So that offensive line is going to have to hold up. I think they probably will, but I think there's a lot of questions there. I think Carr is going to have to be really special this year, though. If he's not special, then I don't know how this team's going to do. I'm still a little suspect on their defense. They got Chandler Jones, but he seems to always show up in maybe 2 or 3 games a year. Then the other games, he's kind of quiet. Last season, the first game of the season, he had what was it, 5 sacks, I think he had. And then the next 5 games, he had 1 or 2 sacks. So he kind of has big games and then he kind of disappears for a little while. So if he can be a little more consistent, then I think I like that. Obviously they have Max Crosby, who was great last year. So I think that's a good one too as well. But I need Chandler Jones to be a little bit more consistent for me. But still, that defense, I just don't know how much I love that defense. If they can create turnovers, then your defense is going to be better. If you can have a bad defense, but if they can force turnovers and make the other team make mistakes, give their offense really good field position, you're going to have a better defense. You're going to have a better team because you're creating turnovers. You're giving yourself more scoring opportunities. So if they could do that, then I could see this team potentially getting onto that, that platform of the other teams in the AFC. But currently, right now, before we even played a game, I do not see that. I see this team as the 3rd best team in this division, and that would then lead me to the 4th best team in this division, the last team I have not talked about, Denver. Again, if you've seen this podcast, you've known that I've always thought if Denver got a quarterback, with the current roster that they have, they could be a good team. They could potentially be a really good team. And they did get that quarterback. They got Russell Wilson. They traded for him from Seattle this offseason, signed him to a monster extension just only about a week ago, I guess, at this point. I just don't... Look, I like Russell Wilson a lot, but you could tell his play is starting to diminish a little bit. He's not the same escape guy that he was. He still has the arm. He's still one of the best deep throwers of the ball in the NFL. You see those moon balls, basically, that he throws 50, 60 yards down the field. He could still do that, no doubt about it. But his ability to escape the pocket and do those Russell Wilson type plays that we saw earlier in his career where there's just no play, nothing's happening, and somehow 10 seconds later he's scrambling to his right side and he's making a play down the field that goes for 25 yards. I just don't think he can do that anymore. I think he's 33, I think he is right now. He's getting older. The legs are starting to go a little bit. He's never been injured before, but then the last couple of years he's been banged up now, so we'll see if that continues. Now playing in the AFC West, well, again, with those defensive guys that I was talking about, we'll see what happens. So I personally I think he's still a top 10 quarterback for sure, but he's not a top 5 quarterback anymore, which is really what you need. Because again, look, Mahomes, Herbert, top 5 quarterbacks. There's no question about it. And then even Carr's a top 10 quarterback. So three quarterbacks in your division are top 10 quarterbacks. And again, Russell Wilson is one, but when you have to go up against those guys, you have to be perfect all the time. And Wilson seems to have hot streaks and then cold streaks, and then he goes on another hot streak, and then he'll have a really bad streak. So if he can be more consistent, if he could show me some more of those legs that he had earlier in his career, get a little more refreshed, a little bit better with his body, and still have that arm that he has. They have great receivers on the outside, even though they lost Tim Patrick to a torn ACL in in training camp this year. They still have Jerry Jeudy. They still have Cortland Sutton. I like those two guys on the outside. And obviously having Nathaniel Hackett as your head coach, the quarterback coach from Green Bay, he's obviously going to bring in a lot of new things to an offense that's been pretty stagnant the last handful of years, to be honest. So I'm excited to see that aspect, but I need Wilson to be better for this team to compete for a playoff spot. I mean, they still could, but with that division, 6 games against those 3 teams, you at least have to split those games, and the odds are that you probably won't split those games. That means you almost have to be just about perfect against the rest of your schedule, because to make the playoffs in the AFC this year, it's at least 10 wins, and I'm telling you it's probably 11 or 12 wins to make the playoffs in the AFC. I would say probably 11 is the mark that you need to get to if you want to make a wild card spot in the AFC. And let's say you go 3-3 in your division, that means you got to win 8 more games. That's a lot of games to win. That's 8 out of 11 games to win. And for a team like Denver, I just don't know if they're that good to do that. And again, that means you have to split those division games. And if you go 2-4, that means you got to win 9 out of 11 games. So I think there's just too many things that could go wrong for them. I just don't like them as much as the other teams. And even though that's coming from me, who's someone who said how much I've loved them if they were to get a quarterback, but now that they have their roster, they have their team complete, I just think the other teams are better, though. They've upgraded at better positions. I think their quarterbacks are better. I think they have better position players in different spots and key spots. And I just like the other teams better. So I wanted to start with that division only because that's the best division in football. There's no doubt about it. If you were to put any of those teams in other divisions, they'd be a 10-plus win team, probably guaranteed, to be honest. If you were to put that team, if you were to replace the Broncos with the Packers, if you were to flip-flop them, the Broncos would run away with that division, the NFC North. If you were to flip-flop the Raiders and, let's say, the Cowboys, the Raiders would easily win that division. So it's just the toughest division in football. So I had to start with it. That's where the big moves were made. The AFC West, it was, everything through the offseason was that, it was an arms race in the AFC West, which is true. And like I started this off with, in order to beat Kansas City, you have to make upgrades. You have to spend. You have to trade for guys. You have to improve your team. You can't just try and build it through the draft. Obviously, yeah, you want to get guys. If you want to get role guys, if you want to get just starters, that's great. You have to fill out your team some way. I think the draft is a great way to do that. But if you want true stars, if you want to win now, you have to go trade for these guys. You have to go sign these guys in free agency. You have to make moves while Kansas City their reign is probably starting to come to an end. This may be the last year that they truly are on top of that division, and maybe even the AFC as a whole. We'll see, but this is the time to do it now. I think all these teams went into this offseason knowing that, and I think they all accomplished their own individual goals, but I still have it as LA, Kansas City, Vegas, and then Denver coming in last place in that division. But I think we saw a lot of other moves as well in the NFL. I think the only other one I'll really truly touch on is Deshaun Watson got traded from the Texans to the Browns, and he's obviously serving his suspension, the 12-game suspension. So we won't see him for the first 12 games of their season. I think that's another really tough division as well, the AFC North. Not as good as the AFC West, but I think it's probably one of the other better divisions across the NFL, with the Browns, Steelers, Ravens, Bengals. Obviously Bengals, were in the Super Bowl last year. Still have Joe Burrow, still have a really good roster. Ravens, they're one of the best organizations in football. Had so many injuries last year. It's hard to really count that year against them because of how many injuries they were dealt with. And they still were, at one point, they looked like they were going to make the playoffs, and then the injuries caught up to them, and they lost, I think, like 4 of the last 5 or 5 of the last 6, whatever it was. They kind of collapsed at the end. The Steelers, finally the Big Ben era is over. At this point, that needed to be done. He was just, he was cooked. He couldn't move in the pocket. His arm was barely there. They draft Kenny Pickett. They signed Mitchell Trubisky, who I'm honestly a fan of. Is he like a top 15 quarterback? I don't know. I think maybe he can be at some point this season, but also, he probably won't be able to finish this season, to be honest, unless he's really good. But I do like him. I think that his ability to move, he's really good athletically. I think he can move out of the pocket really well. I think his arm isn't great, but I think it's not bad, to be honest. And I think, him being a backup to Josh Allen in Buffalo last year, I think that meant a lot. I think he's going to learn a lot from that, and take it over to Pittsburgh, where you see a guy like Josh Allen, whose first 2 years really struggled, and then these last 2 years he's basically been, the best player in the league. So to be able to learn from that, learn from Brian Dable as well, that Buffalo culture that they have, I think to bring that over to Pittsburgh, and kind of use Trubisky kind of similar to Allen, where they can move, they're mobile. He doesn't have as good of an arm, but he kind of has that same physique as him, not as big, obviously. Allen's a huge guy, 6'4", was he like 230, whatever he is. Trubisky's obviously a little bit smaller than that, but I think they have the same play style. So I think him bringing that to Pittsburgh is going to be really good. I think he's going to be solid. The only problem is that as long as he's only good enough, that's not going to be able to have him keep his starting spot. It's going to go to Pickett at some point. But if Trubisky can be, really good, or, be able to kind of like lead that offense and kind of lead that team to victories, not just leave it to the defense to win them games, I could see him keeping that spot. I think there's going to be pressure from the organization, from fans, to go to Pickett anytime Trubisky has a bad game, which is expected. I think you have to expect that when you take a guy in the first round. But I like Trubisky. I think he's going to have a good year. Again, I wanted to see him finish out the year as the quarterback for them. I don't think it will happen, unfortunately, but we'll see what happens with Pittsburgh. I think they'll be solid. And then, the Browns, obviously, is that last team. Not having Watson for the first 12 games, with Jacoby Brissett now being your starting quarterback, you have to hope that you could be 500 or better. It's going to be tough because, Brissett, he's a solid quarterback. There's no doubt, but in terms of backups in the NFL, he's one of the better backups, but he doesn't have a great arm. You have to rely a lot on that running game in Chubb and Hunt. The offensive line is still solid, but it's not as good as it once was. The last couple of years, it's not as good as it was. So we'll have to see how that happens. And, the defense is still good, no doubt. You have Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Denzel Ward. Still a good defense, but in that division, with Brissett as your quarterback, being the worst quarterback in that division as well, you're gonna have to be at least 500 by the time Watson comes back. If Watson, let's say Watson obviously was never suspended, they just got Watson, you starting the season out fresh, from week one, it would be tough not to choose them as probably the favorite in that division, because he is, when playing, I guess maybe now Herbert and Burrow have probably jumped him just because we haven't seen Watson play in over a year, but you go back to his last season, I mean, he was amazing his last season on a really bad team. So it's hard not to say he's not still a top 7 quarterback when playing. But with him now not obviously being available for the first 12 weeks of the season, first 12 games of the season, it's going to be tough for them to potentially make the playoffs. And like I said, you probably have to win 11 games to make the playoffs. So if they're 6-6, that leaves them 5 games. That means you have to win those last 5 games to make the playoffs. So it's going to be tough for them. I think I think it's unfortunate that obviously for them as a team. Now I think Watson deserved to be suspended. I'm not saying that he deserved probably just to be suspended the whole season. I think it was pretty lucky that, again, at first it was 6 games, which was ridiculous. At least it got moved up. But, for them as an organization, obviously they would have loved for him not to be suspended, because then you have a full season of him. They gave him a 5-year contract, fully guaranteed at $230 million, which has really set back the quarterback market. I'll probably in the next episode, I'll talk about Lamar Jackson and his contract negotiations. He has a deadline on Friday, which is tomorrow, as I'm recording this, for a new contract. And that Watson contract threw all the quarterbacks off and teams off, because if he's going to get a fully guaranteed contract for not playing a single game last season and for having this whole lawsuit, whole suspension looming over him, and then obviously it turned out to be 12 games, and he got fully guaranteed money at $230. If you're other quarterbacks, if you're Justin Herbert, if you're Joe Burrow, if you're the Bengals, what do you do with Joe Burrow? Because they don't have a lot of money. If he's going to be asking for $200+ million that fully guaranteed, that's just a lot for them to ask for. And obviously, you do it because he's a top 5 quarterback, he's a generational type quarterback. But for a team like that, with doesn't have that much money, and the Browns don't really have like that much money to be fair as well, but the Bengals have even less. It just puts a big snag on all contracts for quarterbacks in the future. So I'd love to see how that plays out. I don't think Lamar Jackson's on that level, but you can't argue. I'm not a big Lamar Jackson fan, but you can't argue with the fact that he's won like 70% of his games in the NFL. We'll see what happens with that for sure. And we'll definitely talk about it. Because again, Friday's the deadline, so if he gets one done, we'll talk about it. If he doesn't get one done, we'll still talk about it. But moving on from that, I do want to get into the games for this week. And we're going back to our picks, 5 picks a week. Spread, 5 games, any 5 games, doesn't matter what it is. For the first week, though, I am going to pick the first game of the NFL season, which is Bills at Rams. Going in the future, the only time else I do that would be Thanksgiving games. And I think they do play on Christmas again this year, so I'll do that for Christmas as well. But because it is the first game of the season, and it's a really good game, by the way, Bills-Rams, the Bills look to be the favorite in the AFC. The Rams are for sure one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the NFC. So that's a great opening game. It's probably one of the best opening games, at least on paper, in the last couple years, I would say. And I think the game will definitely reflect, the expectations of this, and the hype going into this game. But we'll start with that one. So like I said, Bills at Rams. The line is minus 2.5 in favor of Buffalo, actually. And again, they're on the road. So they're actually not the underdog. The Rams are. They're the favorites, the Bills. And I'm going with the Bills. I think the Bills this is their Super Bowl year. If they don't win the Super Bowl this year, you at least have to start wondering a little bit, because your window can close like that. You can look like the best team in the NFL, and you get to the Super Bowl, you lose, and then the next year another team, they get the quarterback, they get the guy to come, they get the wide receiver, they get all the things to go right for them, they get no injuries, you get injuries. It's the NFL. Anything could happen. That's why it's pretty amazing what the Chiefs have done the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, what the Patriots did all those years. That you have the same quarterback in play. You have a lot of the same guys on your team still there. But again, as years go on, guys leave for free agency, guys retire, guys get injured. Stuff happens. It's the NFL. Every single week, something new is going to happen to your team, good or bad. Most of the time, bad, to be honest, because it's injuries. But this is Buffalo's year. This is their Super Bowl year. The Rams went for it all last year, and they got it. Obviously, they'd love to get another one, but at least they got one. So, all those draft picks that they traded, all the free agents that they got, all the trades that they made, it worked out because they did win the Super Bowl. This is the Bills' time. In free agency, they went and got Von Miller, signed him to a big contract, which surprised me. I didn't think that they were going to be able to get Von Miller, but that's a huge get. I mean, as we saw with him on the Rams last year, he was one of their biggest impact players ever since they got him about a little more than halfway through the season. He was huge for them down the stretch, because obviously Donald's amazing and he's going to attract every double and triple team, but they have Von Miller off the edge like that, and the way that his legs kind of came back to him last year. If the Bills can get that Von Miller, even if it's just for this year, and they win the Super Bowl, contract's 1,000% worth it, obviously. So they got him. They obviously still have Stephon Diggs. They have Gabe Davis, who looks to be one of the rising, wide receiver 2s in the NFL. He was huge last year in the playoffs. He had a lot of big moments last year. But this kind of seems to be like a true 1-2 duo between them, not just like a Diggs and then it's kind of other guys on their team. Gabe Davis does seem to be like a true wide receiver on that team and a true guy in the NFL as well. And then you have Dawson Knox. They just signed him to a contract extension actually the other day. At tight end, obviously you have Josh Allen, who should be the favorite for MVP. They should be able to finish with the best record in the AFC. Obviously he's going to have a big year, throwing the ball, running the ball, yards-wise, touchdowns-wise, everything like that. So he should be the MVP, assuming, they win. I would say they probably win 13 games, 14 games. And I would probably pick him as my MVP. So I probably should have done predictions for awards. I'll do that after week 1. It's 1 week. It's not going to change a lot. So much happens in the NFL. You can't win an award after 1 week. So I'll do that next week, between MVP, Rookie of the Year, or Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, all that stuff. But yeah, I'm going with Buffalo, like I said. Just quickly about the Rams, though, just in terms of their additions, subtractions, they lost Von Miller. They lost Odell Beckham, even though he's still a free agent. They could potentially sign him still. They got rid of Robert Woods, but they did add Allen Robinson, who has been one of the better receivers in the NFL, but has kind of been stuck in Chicago. Had a really bad year last year, but again, that offense was so anemic and so terrible that I can't exactly blame him. Obviously, coming to LA to have Cooper Kupp as your number one, to have Stafford, to have Sean McVay, you're going to be a better wide receiver. You're going to get more targets. You're going to get more looks. You're going to be more open. So I expect him to have a big year as well. They also got Bobby Wagner, which was, again, another surprise. You know, his time in Seattle was done. Didn't really seem like he was going to go to a couple other teams. Rams seemed like maybe an option, but not the best option, or at least not the number one option. And then it turns out they get Bobby Wagner. Now, is he still the same Hall of Fame linebacker that he was 5 years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago? No, but he's still really solid, to be honest. And he's, you know, the experience that he has and everything he's done in the NFL, it's going to add to this team, no doubt. And he's still a solid player, like I said. It's not like he's bad and he's still hanging on for another year or two. He's obviously towards the end of his prime, but he's still there. He's still going to be a solid player for them, no doubt. So those are some additions, some subtractions that they had on their team. But like I said, I'm going Buffalo -2.5 in this game. It's going to be a close game. It's going to be a really good game. But I do think they'll be able to win by more than a field goal. But now moving on to the Sunday games. So my first game is Niners at Bears. The line is 6.5 for San Francisco, and I'm taking San Francisco. I'm pretty high on the Niners this year, and obviously no Jimmy Garoppolo anymore. It's Trey Lance. Jimmy Garoppolo is actually still there, which is probably the most surprising move in the offseason, was that he didn't get traded. He actually signed, renegotiated, his contract, got a new contract extension. It's, basically a 1-year contract, but he is going to be their backup. So maybe a little bit more pressure on Lance to be good right away, but I think Lance will be good. His arm talent, his ability to run with the ball, as long as his head's in it, and with Shanahan's offense, it's kind of hard not to be, because he's going to make the game as easy as possible for you with running the ball, which they obviously do a lot, and then having guys open with the formations and obviously schemes. So I don't expect him to really struggle that much. I think it's just, as long as he can calm down, put no pressure on himself, and just play his game, I think he'll be fine. But week 1 against the Bears, 6.5. I mean, come on. The Bears are awful. They're a bottom 3 team in the NFL. I would say no doubt about it. They're awful. They're a really bad team. So to get for 6.5, like, you're telling me the Niners can't beat them by more than a touchdown? I mean, they could run the ball the whole game and beat them by 2 touchdowns. So I think this is one of the easier bets of the week, to be honest. Definitely Niners. Go Niners for this game. -6.5, no doubt about it. Third game of the week that I'm choosing, Steelers at Bengals. The line is 6.5 in favor of Cincinnati, but I'm actually going to go with Pittsburgh. Go with the underdogs. I don't know if Pittsburgh will win the game, but I'm at least picking them for the spread. Like I said, I think Pittsburgh is going to be competitive this year, and I think week 1, as we saw last year, they beat the Bills week 1 in Buffalo. So I think, if the story stays the same and it stays true, I think week 1 this year will be just as good. They're playing a similar caliber type team in the Bengals compared to the Bills, as being one of the top powers in the AFC. Obviously, again, they're on the road again. I think Trubisky's going to be solid. I think the defense is going to show up in this game. Joe Burrow had offseason shoulder surgery or elbow surgery, whichever one it was. So he hasn't really played at all in the offseason, through training camp, through preseason. So maybe there's a little rust there. Maybe there's a little, even though they didn't win the Super Bowl, maybe there's a little bit of hangover. There's just a little bit, maybe they think too highly of themselves. Steelers, everyone's kind of writing them off as being one of the worst teams in the AFC, or at least just not being that good. I think they're going to come in and try and prove a point, especially against a division opponent. It's a huge game for them because they need these wins in the division. So, again, I don't know if they win the game, but it's going to be a tough game. You're never going to blow Pittsburgh out. especially now that Big Ben isn't there because the offense couldn't move. The offense can for sure move now with Trubisky, Najee Harris, DeJounte Johnson. Like they can move the ball now. So I'm expecting better things from Pittsburgh, and I think this Week 1 start's going to be a good example of that. I think they're going to put up a good performance against Cincy. I think it's going to be a close game. But fourth game of the week, Jaguars at Washington Commanders. The line is -2.5 Washington. I was surprised by that. I'm actually going to go with Jacksonville. I kind of like Jacksonville. Now, obviously in the AFC, they're still going to be one of the worst teams, but they're going to be better than last year for sure. I think the whole Urban Meyer situation happened. Whatever was going on there, off the field, on the field, coaching wise, play calling wise, all that stuff that was going on, that's all out the window. I said they needed to go get a veteran coach to stabilize that locker room, just bring stability to the whole franchise as a whole, and just go play football. They got Doug Peterson. I think that was a great hire. I think getting him, a Super Bowl winning coach, a guy who knows how to call an offense, knows how to work with quarterbacks, him and Trevor Lawrence, I think it's going to be a good fit. I think Lawrence is going to be more relaxed. They got more weapons for him. They went out, spent money, even if you don't agree with how they spent that money. They still did it, which I give them credit to, because they had so much cap space, and they're going to continue to have cap space. You need to see how Lawrence is going to play. You can't give him no weapons and no threats on the outside, and then when it comes to him getting a contract, you're like, well, you didn't show us anything. It's like, well, you didn't give him anything. So how do you expect him to show you anything if he's getting sacked every 50% of the time? There's no guys open. Guys are dropping balls. You can't run the ball at all. So the fact that they went and got guys, they helped the offensive line. Etienne's going to be the starting back this year. He missed all of last year. Their first round pick from Clemson, obviously was teammates with Trevor Lawrence. James Robinson, it will be back again this year. So he tore his Achilles last year. So I think they have more weapons there. I think they'll be a better team. Now, will it lead to wins? I'm not expecting that, but I think they'll be way more competitive. And I don't think Washington's that good. They got Carson Wentz as their quarterback now. I guess that's an upgrade from Taylor Heineke. I guess I'm not really sure, to be honest. I kind of like Heineke and some of the stuff that he could do, but we'll see. Wentz couldn't even lead the Colts to the playoffs last year, and that was with Jonathan Taylor and a great defense. So you lose Jonathan Taylor and you lose that great defense, and you're on Washington. I don't know how much better they'll be. I think they'll still be one of the worst teams, maybe 5-6 wins, I would say. Maybe. We'll see. But, I like Jacksonville to win this game, to be honest. I think they'll win this game. I think they're going to, a lot of times you see that, like a bad team will win week 1, and it kind of surprises you. And I think that's Jacksonville this year. I think they're going to win this game. I think a lot of people will be surprised at how they play. I think they'll play a much more professional type game, and they'll actually look like a real team. So I'm excited to see what they could do in week 1. And like I said, I have them plus 2.5 in this game. And now moving on to my last game, Chiefs at Cardinals. The line is 6 in favor of Kansas City, and I'm going with Kansas City. I already talked about the Chiefs. I want to talk a little bit about the Cardinals. So they signed Kyler Murray to this huge contract extension. I think it was 160 or 140 million guaranteed for him. Obviously he's been, acting, bratty and all selfish type, and just he's kind of his own guy, to be honest. I really liked him out of college, but he just has so many attitude problems, to be honest, that I don't want to even deal with him. So I'm kind of surprised. I guess you have to give him that contract because he is a top 10 quarterback, but even then at times he could look like a top 13 quarterback. And the last game he played in the NFL was maybe one of the worst games I've ever seen in my life, where he got absolutely obliterated by the Rams in the playoffs. Didn't even look like he wanted to play the game, to be honest. So that doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth when you have to give him that contract extension and he's acting as if he's a top 5 quarterback and he wants all this money and he's going to hold out and he's doing all these things. So that was a really weird situation. I think Arizona was put in a weird situation with that, because what do? You're just not going to pay your number 1 overall pick, who's been good for you, has made Pro Bowls. He's been a solid player, and what you do, you just not pay him and then have to start all over again. I don't think you do that, but Definitely not a situation I'd want to be a general manager, and I wouldn't want to be Steve Keim in that situation. And I think they just have too many questions with this team. DeAndre Hopkins will miss the first 6 games of the season. Cliff Kingsbury is on his deathbed as a head coach. If they have a bad start, he's gone. Even if they have a good start, even if they do okay this year, which I don't think they're going to be that good of a team, I think they'll probably, in their division, they're lucky that Seattle's in it because that's probably the worst team in the NFL. But they're going to finish second to last in that division. I don't even know if they're going to win, be over 500 this year. I don't think they will, to be honest. I just don't like their team. I think there's too many problems off the field. The quarterback doesn't seem to be truly into football, to be honest. And then even then, is he a top 7, top 8 quarterback? I don't think he is. I think, like I said, at times he's like 12 or 13 in the league. He could play like that at times. And the defense still isn't great. So just in general for their season, outlook, I don't like this team. I think Kingsbury will be gone. I think there'll be a lot of questions surrounding that team and what they do going in the future. But in terms of this game against the Chiefs, I saw a 6 and I jumped to it. That was I saw that right away and I had to go pick that because I think, like I said, I think these are two teams that, one, the Cardinals, so dysfunctional and just so Arizona that they're just going to do what they do, and that's just not be good at football, and that's going to do weird things and do bad things. While Kansas City has obviously been the top power in the NFL the last 5 years, like I've been talking about, people think they're going to have a bad year. They think they're going to be down this year. I think they're going to go out in this game. I think they're going to obliterate and destroy the Cardinals. I think this game, 6 points, is way too easy, to be honest, of a pick. I think they're going to go out, show that, yeah, we lost Tyreek Hill. Yeah, we may not be the best team in our division anymore. We might not even, people are picking us not even to make the playoffs. But we're going to show you that we're still the same team. We're still the same Kansas City. We're still the same Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid that we are. So that's such an easy pick for me, Chiefs -6. And, based on the year that I had last year picking games, which I could pull my record up right now. Let's see. I went... where can I see that? I went 53, 36, and 1. One tie I had. But 53 and 36, I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, that's 17 games over 500. So that means if you were to bet if you were to bet $5 on all my bets, you would have won a lot of money last year. So I think I have a pretty solid track record with my picks in terms of the 5 per week that we do. And, I think if you take my picks this week, I think you'd be pretty happy with them. But we'll check back on the next episode after Sunday sometime. We'll recap all week 1, recap the picks, recap the biggest news stories, what happened, and all that. But the last thing before I go is my Super Bowl picks, which has been, I thought about it for a decent amount of time. And like I said, mine may be standard, but I don't think it is. I think one of the teams will be, but I don't think the other one will be. I think the one team that's pretty obvious is the Bills. I've been on the Bills the last 2 years. It seemed like last year was the year to do it. They obviously 13 seconds left. They somehow give up the field goal. They lose in overtime to the Chiefs. And obviously they lose in the divisional round. But this is the year. They're clearly the best team in the AFC. All the expectations are on them. Allen, this is, he's, a lot of people are picking him as the best quarterback in the NFL over Mahomes. And I'd probably agree with that, to be honest, that he is the true number 1 quarterback in the NFL. So it's definitely their time in the AFC to at least reach the Super Bowl. And in the NFC, you have a couple, like I said, it's way weaker than the AFC. You probably have the Packers, the Rams, the Niners, the Bucks, and some people are on the Saints. I wouldn't say I'm on them for the Super Bowl, but I definitely do like them as a team and making the playoffs. But those are probably the teams I would say. And I'm going with the Niners. I think Lance is going to have a really good year. Like I kind of mentioned it earlier, but as long as he could just stay focused, play his game, not worry about distractions from the media, what other people are saying and stuff like that, just play his game and do what he has to do. Play the offense, run the ball. The guys are going to be wide open for in the hole when running the ball. They have a great offensive line. Give it to Deebo Samuel. Give it to George Kittle. Trust Kyle Shanahan. He's going to have a really good year. That defense is really good still. Nick Bosa was amazing last year. Fred Warner's probably the best linebacker. I mean, I would say Micah Parsons, but in terms of just a true just linebacker and not rushing the passer as well, you could probably say Fred Warner's the best in the NFL. So they have a really good team. Again, the coaching staff's there. Obviously, you're fighting with the Rams to win that division, but no matter what, they should be able to make the playoffs as a wild card team. And as we saw last year with Garoppolo, they made it to the NFC Championship game, and I think they could easily do that again this year. And obviously, I picked them to make the Super Bowl. So with that, Bills Niners, I would pick the Bills to win the Super Bowl. So I have the Bills as my 2022-2023 Super Bowl champs, and I think a lot of people would have that as well, but you know what? In my mind, they're the best team in the NFL. It's their time, and I would be surprised if they didn't win it. But again, it's the NFL. That's the great thing about it, is that you don't know who's going to win the Super Bowl every single year. So when we do this on September 8th, we won't know till February, whenever the Super Bowl is, probably February 8th, whatever day that is, whatever Sunday that is. So it's going to be a fun season, like I said, and I'll see you after Sunday's games when we recap Week 1, and then it's going to be 2 episodes a week, like it was the last 2 NFL seasons, with a recap and a preview of the next week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So check back every couple days for a new episode, and yeah, I'll see you next episode.